All right, welcome everyone. I'm Hillary Topper here for We Are Triathletes, and welcome to our webinar, Everything Running. This is a series of 3 webinars. We just finished Everything Bike, and next week we're going to have Everything Swim, so look out for that. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Coach Tim Dells of CB Multisport, and he's also the head coach of We Are Triathletes. Welcome back, Coach Tim.
Thank you, Hillary, and sorry if you all are getting tired of seeing me, but you got to deal with me for at least a few more of these.
Okay, so we're talking everything running right now, right? I guess the big question here is, how do you get faster? You know, if you continue to run a couple of times a week, how do you get yourself to just go a little bit faster and PR that race?
Sure. So running and endurance sports in general is a cumulative sport. You are rewarded for consistently training in endurance sports because a lot of it is about physical and physiological adaptation. So running once a week, running twice a week, and then taking a month off, or not being consistent in training will always keep you from getting faster. So whether you're able to run twice a week or 5 times a week or whatever, as long as you're maintaining a consistent schedule, that is the first step to getting faster. The second step to that is to make sure that the training that you're doing has purpose, similar to like we discussed last week with biking, meaning don't go out and just mindlessly plod around and log miles, because that really won't get you anywhere other than that your running log looks good. You don't want to train too hard all the time, because that's how people get injured and things like that. But you do need to have a purpose, whether it's I'm going out and this is going to be a fully an aerobic run and I'm just getting some base miles and things like that, or today I want to work on my faster running and my foot speed, so I'm going to put some intervals in here and there. You just want to make sure that it's purposeful and in quote unquote intelligent training versus just kind of winging it.
So let's talk a little bit about the drills. How often should you do drills? And can you just run us through a schedule of what we should actually be doing, during the run? Like, okay, so you said have purpose, right? So is there any day that you would just go out and just run?
Yeah, I do. It for me, it is purposeful. But so like my long run day, which may be an easy effort, but the purpose of that run is to get time on my feet. So if I go out and run for 2 hours or 2.5 hours or, whatever, depending on what I'm training for, the effort itself is not going to be high, but the time on my feet is long. So it is maintaining form for the duration of the run, getting hydration and nutrition in and things like that. So while it's not hard and it's just running, I'm practicing for race day, whether it be a marathon or a half Ironman or Ironman off the bike or something like that. There's still a purpose to what I'm doing. As far as drills go, drills are great. Drills are very specific to what you're trying to correct, to a point. So is it do you overstride, or is your arm swing? Do you swing your arms across your body instead of forwards and backwards like you should? Things like that. The easiest and most efficient drill that anyone can ever do is something that's just simply called strides. And what a stride is it's basically an acceleration. They're typically no more than 30 seconds in duration. But what they are is most people, when they're just out running, their form isn't as efficient as it should be. You know, we have a natural form, we have a natural ability to run. Our bodies are built to run. Everyone's run looks a little bit different depending on your own makeup and your own body, but we are built to run. So when we slow down or, or taking it easy or whatever, your form tends to just not be as efficient because it doesn't need to be. You're not working hard. So what a stride does is as you go from that easy run to accelerating, it forces your hips to open up. It kind of forces you to get your arms in line with the drive, and things like that. So it gets you into more of the position that our body is made for. If you ever look at, high level, world-class runners in a still frame photo of any of them, their feet may land a little different, but the principles are all the same. The arm drive is the same. Whether they're a heel striker or land on their toes, their feet always land directly under their body. They're, things like that. So striding helps with those natural movements that we're actually built for.
So my next question is the striking, right? What you just alluded to prior to this. You said, that some people do heel striking, some people do toe striking, some people do it on the midfoot. Does it really matter?
No, I don't really care how your foot lands for the most part. I care where your foot lands. People, the downside of heel striking is that most people who heel strike take too long of a stride. So if your foot is way out in front of you and you're landing on your heel first, it's doing two things. A, it's like hitting the brakes, right? Because it's a stopping force when your heel hits the ground. But B, your leg is usually straight. Your knee has no flex in it, things like that when it lands. So when you land, you're taking 8 times your body weight, which is roughly the force that running creates, and driving that through your ankle, through your knees, up into your hips with no shock absorption at all. Our ankles, knees, and hips are made to absorb shock. So you can be a heel striker. I'm a midfoot striker. I land kind of flat-footed. The harder I run, the more I move up to the front of my feet. But I land with my foot pretty much flat when I land. But it's where does it land? Your foot should always land under your body. So if you think of running from a physical standpoint, all it really is a controlled fall. Everyone who has ever tripped over their own feet and did like the Three Stooges thing where your arms start swinging and all that, you ran with proper form. You just didn't know that you were running. The difference between people who run fast and people who run slow is faster people have more lean in their body when they run, which forces their legs to turn over faster because they're maintaining balance so they don't fall. But their stride does get longer because they're leaning farther forward, but their feet are still landing under them. If you think of the practice of trying to run up your steps at your house or at the park or whatever, no one ever runs with heavy feet up the stairs, right? You're kind of, you may feel heavier or whatever, but your feet always land pretty softly. And that is how it should feel when you run, whether you're landing on your heel or on your forefoot or your midfoot or anything like that. So if you can focus on keeping your foot, your landing foot underneath of you, then the rest of it is kind of arbitrary at that point.
Okay, the next question I have for you, so we were talking about consistency. How many times a week should you really go out and run? Especially since we are doing so many different activities, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest?
So it's very individual. It depends on your running history. It depends on what I call durability, which is how often do you get injured? How easy is it for you to get injured? And it also depends on your strengths and weaknesses kind of throughout the sport. Training for 3 sports is hard, right? It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. So if you're a runner, you come from a running background, running is easy and kind of comes naturally to you, then you should not be running as much as a triathlete as someone who running is a weakness. It's very easy in this sport to, since we have to train for 3 things, to focus on the things that we're good at because it's the most fun, it's the most enjoyable, right? It looks best on the watch and on Strava and all that stuff. And we tend to enjoy those things more. But you won't get faster that way because you're putting your weaknesses aside. So me, like if I'm just in a running block where running is my primary focus because I have a running race coming up or it's the off season or whatever, I'll run 5 to 6 days a week. Now, but for me, I'm durable. I rarely get injured. I'm fairly efficient as a runner, so I can do that. For athletes that I have that are training for long course and they just don't have that much time, they might only run twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
We might sneak a third one in by giving them a run off of the bike or something, which will equal a third run. But they may only run twice a week. So if you have issues with injury, then you need to keep that load lower, on the lower side, and that's fine. But in that case, say you're only running twice a week, that one of those runs, most likely your longer run, should be an easier intensity and just focus on getting time on your feet. And then the second run, put some real purpose into it, whether it's, throw in a couple 5-minute intervals at your 10K effort or something like that, where it forces you to change your stride, change your form. You work a little different muscles and a little different. It becomes more anaerobic than aerobic, so you get some actual adaptation out of it.
That's great. We do have a question in the queue, but before we get to that question, someone had emailed me today about a question that he had. He said he gets shin splints, okay? How can you avoid them? And then once you get them, what can you do about it?
So I come from a soccer background, so I've had shin splints far too many times in my life to care about or to want to explain to anyone. Shin splints are an overuse injury. That is what they are. And they occur typically one of 2 ways. One is you're running way too much, which is rarely ever the case. I've had them from that doing like a really big volume where I was like, oh, I'm going to go run 80, 90 miles this week, right? Gotten shin splints from that because I stepped up way too high in my volume from where I was, took too big of a jump. The second one is you're most likely landing with your foot too far forward, like we discussed earlier. There's a lot of fascia and things in your shins, and what shin splints are is their inflammation. And typically that inflammation is coming from repeated abuse, right? Whether it's, in my case, you run a whole bunch of miles and that's just, it's 200,000 steps in a week and they said, no, thank you. Or if you're landing with that foot too far forward, like I said, every time you land, it sends that shock up through your shins and through your knees and things like that. So that will cause inflammation. It'd be like if you kept hitting your hand over and over and over again, eventually your hand's going to bruise. Same general concept. So what I would suggest is first look at your foot position for that person. So it could be try to, when you're running, instead of reaching out with your foot to land, try to think about pushing off with the back foot. Most people reach their leg out to run faster or to run. The best runners in the world, that front foot never changes in terms of how far out it goes. All that changes is the extension of the rear leg. So if you think about pushing off of the ground instead of reaching to get to the ground, that will move your lead foot in and will help with shin splints just because it's going to make you more efficient and allow more shock absorption throughout the body.
So Irem says, can you get shin splints from running on a treadmill? She says she tends to train mostly on a treadmill.
Yeah, you can. Modern treadmills, today's treadmills are way better than the ones of, 10 to 20 years ago that had no shock absorption in them at all, and they were really abusive. Personally, I don't like the treadmill because I don't like being inside, but I have a lot of athletes that run on the treadmill for training because it's dark all the time and they don't want to go outside, because of their work schedules or whatever. Um, the key is with the treadmill, because the belt is running under you, it's very, very easy to go too hard, right? Because you're not pushing yourself to get there. The treadmill is moving the ground underneath of you versus you moving across the ground. And B, it's really easy on a treadmill to then extend that front leg out. Like because it's really easy because you're just keeping rhythm with the belt, versus the ground where it's solely on you. So I know people that do a ton of training on treadmills and do it very well. But the treadmill, because it is stable to a point, but it's a foreign surface compared to something static like the ground. You tend to overcompensate for it and land a little more rigidly than you would, say, outside. So you certainly can get shin splints from it.
Okay, so the next question is, let's talk a little bit about hill repeats, right? What's your recommendation for running hills, and how do you get better at it without wanting to quit a race?
So for running, I love hill repeats as a form of getting faster. I hardly ever send my athletes to a track to do speed work because people get hurt on the track because you can overstride on the track. It is very rare for someone to get hurt running uphill. And there's two reasons for that. A, you really can't overreach when you're running uphill. And so because if running is a form of falling, right, where you're leaning forward like this and using gravity, well, if you take the ground and you move the ground to uphill, even though you're upright, your form is now correct. So you just took that and you just turned it on its axis and moved it up. So most people's form is good and efficient when they run uphill because it's just natural. You bend your neck, you bend your knees, you kind of start to get a shorter, little more choppier stride. You're forced to push off of the back leg to move up the hill. So it becomes way easier on your body. As far as getting to the point where you don't want to quit, running hills hurts. It hurts whether you are 110 pounds and you're doing them or you're 350 pounds. They hurt no matter what. What I would tell people to do is start with a less severe hill. And you also want to run one that is a pretty consistent grade. Because it will allow you to actually get a rhythm and kind of, if you go up one that just kind of does this all the way up, it's really hard to maintain any sort of consistency doing so. Versus if you can find one that's it's a steady, just a nice steady grade going up, you can actually then settle into that. And I would tell people start at a 30-second interval, run up it for 30 seconds, and then take a minute to come back down. And then go back up for 30 seconds, take a minute to come back down. And then you can stretch it to a minute up and 2 minutes down. If you're running hill repeats, I always suggest that your rest time is about double your run time. Because running hills are purely muscular. It is a muscular exercise. So your heart rate may not spike super high, but you're putting in a lot of work. So you want to give yourself twice the recovery time of what your run time is.
Okay, so another question is, does cross training with the bike help?
Just as a pure runner, absolutely. If you're running alone, any kind of cross training is good. Coming from a triathlon lifestyle that I live, we cross train all the time as triathletes, right? Because we train 3 sports. But of those three, running is the absolute most abusive of the three. Swimming, there's zero shock on your body. There's zero abuse. As long as your form isn't terrible, then you can swim until you're 150 years old, right? Cycling, it's mechanical. You're attached to a piece of equipment. So again, no shock on the body. It's all muscular and aerobic. Running, there is a physical pounding and abuse that happens. And then beyond that, any form deficiencies are exponential in running versus anything else because of the impact. So if you are strictly a runner, and I'm assuming this may be somebody from your Galloway group or something like that, absolutely get a bike or go to the pool or go even play tennis or go play golf or just something to move differently. It will allow you to recover. It will allow you to be fundamentally stronger, which always helps.
And the last question, before I get to another question, is how do you handle gels? So what's the rule of thumb? Is it every 45 minutes that you have a gel?
So I personally can't do gels. They upset my stomach. I also find that when I am running, it is really hard to take in anything solid-ish. It's hard to chew, right? It's hard to swallow. Your stomach is jostling. So for me, I can't do solids. So my nutrition and calories all comes from liquid. I'm an infinite nutrition guy. It works really well for me. I mix it in my water bottle, in my handheld, or if I'm wearing a belt or if I'm wearing a pack or whatever, I mix it in, and that gets me anywhere from, depending on how I mix it, 150 to 300 calories an hour, depending on what I'm doing. What I would say is that if you're going every 45 minutes between fueling, that is way too long, in my opinion. Now, the longer the run gets, the bigger of a problem it becomes. Like if I'm going out and running for 90 minutes, I typically don't even carry water because I'm not going to dehydrate or I'm not going to have a sugar crash or anything like that in that time. If I'm going out for a 3 to 4 hour run in the woods, to go for a nice trail run or something, then you got to be up on your fluids and your calories. So at that point, I'm trying to take calories in about every 20 to 25 minutes. And I try to take my fluids in, like if I was just, say, running with water because it wasn't very long, then it's about every 15 minutes. So you definitely don't want to wait 45 because it'll take another 45 for it to be processed. So now you're at an hour and a half between when you started and when you're actually getting your fuel source. So I would definitely go earlier than that.
Wow. Okay, good. And Steve had a question about if you had any recommendations, and if I screw up this word, help me out here, for a runner who suffers from metatarsal.
So the metatarsals are the bones in your feet that go to your to your toes. Well, not for your toes; they're across the top of your foot. I'm sorry. That can be any number of things. For most people, it is usually, if there's an issue, it's over the ball of their foot. It's going up to the ball of their, a straight line up from the ball of the foot is where they have metatarsal issues. Most likely, depending on which metatarsal it is, 1 through 5 and things like that, it is shoe related. And that could be the wrong type of shoe, or maybe there should be an insole or something like that. Without knowing more about it, it would be hard for me to say. But my guess is if they went and got fitted for shoes, they were probably told to be in a shoe that's probably way too much for them. Because
Does it also have to do also with the way you tie your shoelaces? I mean, I've also heard that it's totally, you should be doing it a certain way, or
it can if you over tie them and put way too much tension. And then in that case, it's just a general inflammation issue more than anything. So if it's something that's related to that, your foot would be, say, tender to the touch on top. But if it's something that's related to the physical running aspect or the gear aspect of it, then it'll feel a little deeper in the foot.
I'm going to unmute Steve and have him explain what the issue is. Steve, you're
Okay.
on.
Can you hear me?
I got
Yes.
you, Steve.
Thank you, Hillary. So Tim, so I've taken to wearing Newtons with the extra cleats for the metatarsals, and as soon as I wear another running shoe, I get soreness. But now what I've noticed is even when I'm walking long distances and not running, the ball of my foot hurts and the third metatarsal out to the fifth metatarsal. So I'm wondering if I should be wearing those running shoes even for walking, or if it's just a condition that, so let me give you a little bit more information. Last August, I broke my, I had a stress fracture of my fifth metatarsal on my left foot. I had stopped wearing Newtons and, that happened. So it took me 3 months to recover. But now I notice when I'm running and I'm wearing the Newtons, I'm fine, but even just walking long distances, I get sore.
So what Newtons are you running in? Which model do you know?
The ones that I just bought new ones, the Fate 4.
Okay. So you're not running in like a full-blown, like a Newton distance or something like that that has like the gigantic block underneath of the foot.
These have the separate ones.
Right. It's the five little or four little ridges or whatever underneath that run lengthwise. Right. So Newtons are an interesting case in their own. Without seeing your running form and things like that, I couldn't really say for sure, but the truth is about 2 to 3% of runners on the planet should be in Newtons. Most people that run in them shouldn't be in them. And that may not be your case without knowing, right? Without seeing you run. But my guess would be that running in the Newtons, the form that you're using in the Newtons is part of what's creating the inflammation. But because you're running in a shoe that is cushioning that area, it's not noticeable till after the fact. That would be my guess. Now, again, I don't know. I could be wrong. But if your shoes were fitting you the way that you're running the way that they should, you shouldn't then be having an issue just walking around in a normal shoe.
Right.
So that would be my guess. But again, I don't know. Now, what we can do if you wanted to shoot a video or something of you on the treadmill at the gym, like from the side, and then email it to me, like I could take a look and then we could have more dialogue and feedback, and then I could maybe help you diagnose it further.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So the other question, so Irem is going to be doing a 50K in March.
Awesome.
And so far she's only done only one marathon, and she's doing her second in November for New York City. She wanted to know what kind of recommendations that you have for somebody who wants to do a 50K.
So my first assumption is going to be that the 50K Irem is doing is going to be on trail. So can you confirm that through the
I'm going to unmute you.
Okay.
Irem.
Okay.
Can you confirm that?
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So there are two that I'm looking at. There's one in New Jersey that is a trail that is in February, and there's one in March, which is on Long Island, but it's at a park. So I don't think that is trail. I think that's just I think it's like a 10 laps in a 5K situation.
Okay.
Yeah. So one is trail, one is not.
Okay. So what I would say is a road marathon in terms of abuse on the body is much more severe than a 50K trail run. Way more severe. Wow. I absolutely hate the road marathon because it destroys me. The training just tears me apart. It beats me up because it's really hard on the body. 50K in the woods, no problem. I don't care how much elevation it is. I don't care how hard it is. Like, it is still way easier on the body. So that's something to consider. 50K on the road is a whole nother beast. They say, you know, in a marathon that the halfway point is mile 20. You know, it's not mile 13, it's mile 20 because the last 10K are the hardest. Well, take that feeling that you've experienced and then tack another 5 onto it. And that second 5 is going to be exponentially harder than that 10K from 20 to 26. It takes a lot of mental strength and fortitude to be consistent in a 50K road run. So I personally will never do a 50K road run unless there was some major extenuating circumstances. But 50K on the trail is amazing. It's longer time on your feet because you do run slower in the woods as a rule, but it's way easier on the body. The scenery tends to be way nicer, you know, and things like that. And also the trail running crowd is a different crowd. It's really easy in road racing, or especially in triathlon, to get caught up with all these super type A people when they're, you know, they get started in a lake corral and they're trying to drive and push through everybody and all this kind of stuff. Trail races, another trail runner would give you the pack off of their back if you were in trouble and they thought it would help you. Like, so it's a totally different atmosphere altogether. If you've never done trail racing before, I highly suggest you try it at least once, whether it's a 10K or a 50K or whatever, because it's totally different experience and it's a very enjoyable one.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
Of course.
And with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you, Coach Tim. This was wonderful. I'll put up your contact information, but you know what? If you want to provide it to the folks that joined us today, that would be great.
Sure. You guys can find me if you want to just send me an email, especially you, Steve, if you want to correspond further on their shoes. You guys can reach me at Coach Tim at cbmultisport, multisport.com, or you can find me in the Triathletes Diary or We Are Triathletes groups. You can just search my name, Tim Dels, or I'm sure Hillary will tag me whenever this goes up. And I'd be happy to talk further with anybody if you guys have any questions that come up later or anything like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And this is Hillary Topper signing out from We Are Triathletes webinar series. This one was everything running. And